Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is McKay Allen. I'm the Director of Content and Communications at LogMyCalls, and we're excited you're here today for our webinar. We've got a fantastic webinar today with Chase McMichael, co-founder and CEO of InfiniGraph. The title of today's webinar is 5 Ways to Amplify Your Content Marketing, which is something that I know I'm interested in learning about, and I'm sure if you're here today, you're interested as well. So we're excited to have Chase with us. I'll introduce him more fully in a moment. First, some background on who we are, why we do these webinars. LogMyCalls is a call analytics solution used by marketers across North America. Companies use us primarily for 3 reasons. Number 1, basic call tracking. You're probably familiar with that. We can tell you which ads, campaigns, and keywords generated phone calls and which don't. Second is we record calls. And third is we actually analyze the content of phone calls and extract data from those calls. So we're able to tell you if a phone call resulted in a conversion, like an appointment set or a sale made. We're also able to tell you if the caller was a high-quality lead. So we literally score calls, provide a 0 to 100 lead score for phone calls. And then we also tell you if there was missed opportunities on the phone call. So did the caller have a high lead score, but for some reason he didn't convert? That would be a missed opportunity. So we do these things to provide you more visibility into your phone calls. So it's literally like web-level data for phone calls now, the first time anybody's ever provided this. Second question is, why do you do these webinars? We do about 2 webinars every week. You can see today we have a webinar with Chase McMichael. We're excited for that. Tomorrow we have a webinar with the CEO of the Offer Machine and then a vice president at Has Offers. And we're excited for both of these webinars. So we do 2 webinars a week. You can go to logmycalls.com/webinar to see upcoming webinars and then also to watch the recordings from some of our past webinars as well. So yeah, you can see we've got quite an extensive library. I think we have over 150 webinars in our webinar library already. So with that, a couple of announcements first. We encourage you to ask questions. Type those questions into the question bar, and I'll read those to Chase at the conclusion of his presentation, and he can address those. And then second, the webinar is being recorded, so just watch for that recording tomorrow. It'll come to you via email in your inbox. And so with that, let's introduce Chase. I met Chase in San Francisco at a Search Engine Journal conference. We both write for Search Engine Journal. He is, as I said a moment ago, the CEO and co-founder of InfiniGraph. They provide brands with intelligent content amplification, native advertising, engagement performance analysis, and large-scale competitive insights. So he has led teams at 2 startups, Oracle, Sprint PCS. No, those are not the startups, but 2 startups, and then companies like Oracle, Sprint PCS, Chase, and Hearst. He's received the Fast Tech 50 Award. He's in the Marketing Sherpa Viral Hall of Fame. He's done a lot of stuff. Plus, he writes for Search Engine Journal, and is an all-around great guy. So we're excited to have Chase join us today. Chase, thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, and you're joining us from the Silicon Valley today, right?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, McKay.
Yeah, we're excited you're here. And everybody, before I toss it over to Chase, why don't you type in the question bar, just give us your name real quick and where you're dialing in from. I see your name, but just tell us where you're dialing in from to give Chase and I an idea of where people are located geographically here. We've got Minnesota, we've got New Jersey, Miami. Can't beat Miami. Fantastic place.
Love place.
I'm located in Utah. We've got South Beach, we've got Toronto, we've got Orlando. So we've got people from all over the map. We've got LA. So awesome. Well, it looks like a good crowd today. We're excited you're here. And Chase, thanks for joining us, sir. I'll give you control of the screen, and the floor is yours.
All right, excellent. So yes, we are going to go through the 5 ways to amplify your content marketing, and we're also going to address, what is native advertising. And so yes, I am Chase McMichael. I'm the CEO and co-founder of InfiniGraph. Thank you for that nice introduction, McKay. So let's drop right into it. So the value proposition, I think every brand or small business will agree with this, that content and the physical drive that you need to do for your business is, not only getting higher engagement throughout the consumer path to purchase, but you also have to stay, top of mind. And why are you here? If we don't address that, then everyone's going to just log off. But first we're going to learn about content amplification and how do I do that all the time across my brand. Then there's the on and off domain amplification. What is that? We are going to address native advertising. It's a very confusing and buzzwordy term. However, it's very legitimate and it's working at scale. And how we're going to mobilize your content marketing. And I'm going to address some very cool, very specific things that you can do as a company to take advantage of what's happening in this mobile explosion that we're seeing. So the barriers of reaching your brand audience online. And these are facts that most people either know about but really haven't maybe not codified in their industry. And the fact is that we're dealing with a content deluge. Amount of information that's being produced and pushed out is unfounded from what it's been in the last 10 years. And it's just incredible. And there's some crazy numbers out there. The other number two is that you're dealing with your audience that's, frankly, they're ADAD. They're heads down. They're very focused on just what they're interested in, and you're having to deal with that on a daily basis. The third part is that you as a brand and your customers, they have tunnel vision. They're only interested in what they want. They want it to be served to them in a very personalized fashion. So these are factors that you're obviously going to have to be very reticent on. And number four is the consumer path to the journey is unpredictable. The facts are is that depending upon the type of content and how you deliver that and your messaging, and all of these factors have to be taken into consideration when you're building out an overall arching strategy. And here's one of the biggest problems, and a lot of people just really don't know this, but in the last 3 years, about $110 billion was spent on content marketing. And for the people on the call probably experienced that how do I get engagement? And that a lot of the actions are just either content's not even being seen, but it's a lot of it's stuck in these silos. And it's not only stuck in silos, but there's really no content cross-connect that we're going to talk about today. And how do I traverse across all my customer touch points? We did an analysis over last 3 years of Disney where they're continuing to exponentially push out content, post-based content, but their engagement is pretty much plateaued off, and you can definitely identify what they're doing from a paid perspective, but their social shares have actually declined. This is common across probably every brand on the planet today, and so how do we deal with this? And I love this graph because this is really showing some of the biggest players in the space, biggest brand-wise conglomerates, and every one of these brands that you see on the screen is pushing out vast volumes of content and doing anything and everything with agencies to content marketers to programs to software, really to reach and retain and gain that customer's attention. So it's formidable out there. There's no joke. And I'm sure everyone's heard about the paid, owned, and earned. But the problem is that this is a siloed world. A lot of times we have different teams. It's not connected, different systems. The beautiful thing about the last 10 years is the birth of social. It's really changed the game, but it's also created some complications. Paid media is not going away, but it is fundamentally changing, and there's a construct of social that's really the underlying and underpinning fabric that every brand really truly has to understand. And I did want to mention this because this recently came out with Atlas, and very similar to DoubleClick, but with some new capabilities of being able to track your customers on any device if they're socially logged in across multiple touch points. So this is a big deal. It's really opening up that connected world that I just described, and so we're hoping for some great things from this. So keep your ear to the ground when it comes to Atlas. But coming back to this integrated content experience, what is content intelligence? And that's really understanding when content is pushed out through a medium, what type of levels of engagement are happening, where's it going? And the reality is social truly is this underlying and underpinning fabric. Where paid, you have your prospects, you're going after them, you're trying to reach them direct. It's very direct outbound. Whereas owned is you've got customers and you're interacting with the physical customers. Whereas earned is your advocates. And there's a whole studies done on this. The reason why I'm bringing this to the forefront is that's really social is this interconfluence between all of these mediums, and it really has integrated itself in an amazing and a successful way. So a lot of you may have heard of the word omni-channel, and when you look at your customer, the facts are is that they are connecting with you across multiple touch points. You're actually accessing and acquiring physical data that can be purchased, and or they're providing you data. More of the advanced brands are having an integrated CRM or integrated marketing platform. They're either going to your physical stores, and a lot of times context just gets lost. But one of the things that's true across all of omnichannel is the fact that there's one thing that connects everything. And really what's cool about that is content. And pretty much content is the fundamental foundation for all brands to reach their audience. Why content marketing is gotten such a big deal in the last few years is because a small company can create great content, create great stories, and reach a vast audience and change the game. So this has been an incredible equalizer where the brands that used to get with agencies and they would create these highbrow pieces of content and it wasn't resonating with the audience because the user generation explosion occurred. So a lot of things have changed in the favor of the smaller companies by really focusing on stories and content creation. But at the end of the day, as I described, all this content, I got to get it amplified. If I'm not amplifying my content, I'm spending a huge amount of dollars and time of my staff or external team, and if I'm not amplifying it, then I'm just talking in a vacuum, unfortunately. So visual content marketing, and personally for our company, has been very successful. I don't think anyone would doubt on the call today that Pinterest, Instagram, and really going down the list of all social sites that have embraced visuals, just like Twitter. It's now most of the posts you'll see are images, and with Facebook's adoption of video to counteract with what YouTube has been so successful with. We're just talking about those very incredible visuals that really drive people to engage. And so the cool thing about what's happening in this business is that even the visuals now, with like infographics and things like that, really are driving a huge amount of lead generation, ability for people to have a desire to share your content. And again, this is another equalizer where people are coming to the table with amazing visuals, not spending huge amounts of dollars, and getting traction with that target audience. So I want to talk a little bit about this content marketing circle here. And I don't want to spend, I'm not going to spend time on the whole creation and publishing, but I'm more interested in, as part of this call, would be the promotion of that content. And, defining your objectives and things like this. There's a lot of technologies and data out there to determine this and what's resonating with your audience, and even ourselves, we do that. But for the call, we're really talking about the analysis and the promotion and being able to be smart about that. And so, what is the DNA of content marketing? And it's the cycle. Not only am I going to have to identify what content works best for my business, which is, if you notice, a lot of companies out there are trying a lot of different things, and the reason why is because they're trying to find out what types of content are working with their customers that not only gets them to respond, but gets them to engage. And the holy grail to all of this is getting them to share and do outbound so that your audience is the marketers for you. once you've done that and gone through this entire process, then it's the doubling down of, what is driving your highest ROI. If you don't know about Jason Miller, who came out of Marketo and now he works at LinkedIn, he created an amazing amount of content around repurposing content, like creating these big rock pieces of content, breaking them up, redistribution. But the kernel to all content is promotion. If you're not promoting your content, and you think about it, you may spend maybe $500, some people spend thousands of dollars, but then when it comes down to, hey, how much are you spending on promotion, they're not even willing to spend, $200. So it's really an integral part when you start pushing out your content, that you have to have this as part of a plan. And for us, one of the things that we were successful with was ebooks. And the reason why I'm saying, comes from who you're working with. It really does, because if you're working with, let's say, influencers or an agency that has a high degree of connections with a target audience you want to achieve, connect with, or maybe an industry leader like Marketo, all of those really are, and this took time, by the way, but to get relationships with people that already have established audiences and a base that you want to tap into is critical. Providing something to that partner to make them look greater and be more effective in reaching their customer base is part of the partnership, and that's something we obviously brought to the table. But this took several years. So, but it was also a commitment. We started out with a commitment. Some companies are very focused on visual content, ebooks. Others are blogging. So there's multiple ways, and this has been well documented for the people on the call, of different types of content and the methods of distribution, etc. But for us personally, and what I wanted to really bring to the table, is that we've been very effective with ebooks and utilizing social as an outbound channel to garner individuals registering for the ebook, getting access to the insights, things like that. So we've integrated this as an experience. And all these ebooks here will have these slides obviously available. But for us, this is what was most successful for ourselves, and that's something we just wanted to describe to the team here on the call. So the digital marketing landscape, I know we introduced Infinigraph, but where do we reside? And not only are we started from like a big data analytics business, and that morphed into this whole content analysis, which really put us in the position of between a native programmatic distribution. So we're taking content, scoring content, and being very smart about distributing that through networks for the brands. And so this is a very almost confusing. The background here is showing the actual market itself, which is even more confusing. So what is native advertising? This has been around for a while, and it's changed, and it's been morphed into many things. Like sponsored content, advertorial, which we're going to talk about, promoted posts, which is really pretty new, which has come on the scene, branded content, which has been around since the days of even a newspaper, and native advertising, which is truly here to stay. So I wanted to provide this matrix, and if you haven't had a chance to see the Search Engine Journal post that we put out, it actually talks more in depth about what native advertising is and the different nuances about it. But I wanted to extract this out of the post to really bring it to the table, because depending upon the size of your organization and the teams that you have in place, from either an editorial, or if you're using a public relations group to create content, or maybe like a Skyward or Contently, where you're using an external team to potentially create content. At the end of the day, you're either pushing that out through a publisher, a blog network, you're putting it on your own properties. And this matrix is really important because, depending upon how you distribute that, depends upon the type of context and what audience are you addressing it to. So believe me, one piece of content doesn't fit all. And that's a big mistake that we see a lot of times, is people taking a piece of content and trying to redistribute that without really taking consideration the distribution and the audience, and then really altering that to be a little more personal. So user engagement from a customization perspective is hard, but as a brand, or as even a smaller company with maybe limited budget, you're definitely want to do scalability, and there's a huge amount of automation on the out there. I am going to show some sponsored type text-based examples, branded content. We like the contextual advertising advertorial, because it not only gives you distribution, but it keeps you in context. So we'll be also showing examples of that as well. So everyone on the call, I'm sure, has heard about Google. If you haven't, you're under a rock. And the reality is that Google really was, I would say, ostensibly the first native ad tech, where they inserted, it looks just like the search you did, but it's now in the stream. So it's like when you did a search, and you're seeing these text ads really pretty much over every publication. They usually are on the right or bottom side of a page on a a publication, like Entrepreneur or Inc. And Google clearly, with their AdSense product, which was a widget, really started that whole movement, and then that eventually morphed into a very visual display. But this has been around for a long time, and it's being used. And if BuzzFeed, I think, is the king when it comes to taking sensationalized or other types of content. They have some incredible programs they run for brands to amplify your content. Some of the content, some of it's be questionable, but when you look at their growth and just how they're reaching, and they're getting big brands like Virgin and whatnot, it's undeniable that they really did tap into something of aggregating great content and viral content, and just amplifying that and putting their own advertorial around it. They have a very large team, obviously. Whereas Entrepreneur, like B2B type magazines, the sponsor-based posts are very prevalent. Not only are they jacking in the ad holes, but the actual physical content. For a publisher, this is premium for them, because they love it. The writer is creating content and it's sponsored. So this is a much more on the higher end, much more expensive, and is very effective as well, because you're creating high quality content that's interested, or very targeted and interesting to a target audience that's valuable to the brand. And then there's in-stream, and I'm sure everyone on the call has experienced an in-stream ad. And here I'm showing the mobile examples, but the reality is that a lot of times in-stream is just not in context. And I hope you'll agree with me that a lot of times when you see these sponsored posts, and now they're doing promoted pins on Pinterest, that how relevant it is. And that's a key to all of this, is the relevancy. And I know there's some backlash now going on with Facebook, where we're seeing too many ads, and a lot of it's just not relevant to me, even though it may match certain attributions. If I'm not engaging with that content, then those posts, then I figure it should give them a clue that that's not relevant to me. But hasn't happened, and a lot of times these are intrusive. So this in-stream is not only here to stay, but Yahoo now has a product out there called Gemini. So there's definitely, and now you're seeing here in Google, obviously wanting to enter into this business. And there's a lot of M&A activity when it comes to the in-stream technology. If you are a brand and you're not using one of these sponsored posts or something, you really are missing out. How long this is going to be or last when it comes to the effectiveness, that's clearly going to be coming down to just how great the targeting is going to transform. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is just the fact that this is one method of really what they say native, because you're in the stream, But we like in context. So this is another example here. This is what we do. And it's really taking the brand's content, repackaging it, and then putting it into content that's relevant to a target audience or in context. And the reason why this works so well is because the content that's being produced and distributed is not only relevant to the audience, but the actual content from the brand is part of the story. And that's that upper left-hand side of the integrated experience. So I'm sure everyone has experienced the Outbrain or Taboola, maybe Gravity, which was acquired by AOL. But this is the amplification, paid amplification, where I'm going into a console, I'm dropping in my link, image, and I'm pushing my content out on, let's say, CNBC. And unfortunately, it shows up with a lot of other different types of content. This has been very confused, and people have called this native. I can't figure out why. I think it was just because it sounded good. But it's a paid placement at best. A lot of times the targeting is very questionable, and you don't really control how your content's positioned with other posts. And for some publications, it's pretty racy what's being put out there. And I'm sure you've seen these before. But these are actual widget-based type units. They are, there's a contractual deal that's done with the publishers. And some of the data out there and case studies has shown some great results, but there's also been some not so great. And it comes down to the type of content and the relevancy. And unfortunately, a lot of these that are being stuck on the right-hand side or bottom just don't have a great deal of relevancy, and therefore they do get clicks, but then when it comes down to the physical conversion or the quality, that's where usually it falls off. So it was a really cool case study, and I just wanted to bring this up. And I love the title. It's like Native Advertising Wars. But and then they obviously jack in Outbrain versus what I would call a little bit more in contextual in-feed strategy. So I don't know if this is the greatest example, but I really enjoyed it because it is really published out, and it was with relevance. And when you go take a look at the actual article out there, the results really weren't that great. And so I don't want to come on this call, saying that everything works, everything's great. All you have to do is, throw some money at this, and you'll be successful. What I loved about this, and why I'm, bringing it to the table, is some of the issues that they had, where they didn't have a good squeeze page, vis-a-vis what I mean is a good landing page where they were capturing leads on a consistent basis. They were talking about some of the challenges of just the quality. So again, it's difficult to get high quality if your content's not great. So always go back to the content, and then your targeting. But they did actually get some leads from this, and they were relatively expensive, and that's something that is really important, is about how do you optimize your outreach programs, and your cost effectiveness has to be monitored very carefully. But the reason why I just really encourage you to read this, because of some of the insights that I think everyone would glean from this. So let's go right into what's called amplification of owned media. A lot of times when you go to a brand's website, it's sort of kind of shocking. And if you've ever done, like, go to Amazon or Home Depot, they are doing aggressive retargeting. And that means that you are being cookied. And then if you go to any website across the web, you will see their ad or see something you searched on. But when you go back to their site, the physical website, they don't show you what you were engaging with. So there's that loss of context. And this is sort of kind of the bane of the ad tech world. They've done such a good job of optimizing those ad holes, where the ads show up, and tracking and utilizing your data. But when you go back to the brand's page, you lose context. So what I want to do is show you some quick examples of what, on-domain looks like. How do I amplify my content across all my customer touch points? And that's really an important factor, and it's we call the native insertion aspect of this. And I just described this. I should have went a little quicker to the slide, but this is that disconnected problem that I just described, and really we need this integrated view of when a customer comes to not only our site but external, how are we showing them that right content? Now, we're a big interest graph company, and part of that is that it is a game changer. Really, for the first time, people are publicly liking and sharing content across multiple platforms, and that information is providing a treasure trove of not only behavior but also content preferences. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is this is what we actually tap into to be smart about what we should be displaying, what should be surfaced based upon user interaction, which is the trends, or the actual personalization of that content, because now we have a usage behavior behind that. And what we're seeing is some phenomenal results, where not only are we displaying rich content that's interactive, that can be personalized, but it's also conforming in a mobile environment. And so we're seeing not only higher time on site, but greater time on the content, interaction, and even share. And this is a problem that pretty much all brands are suffering with, is that they're not positioning their content even on their own site. Or you go to, let's say, their social, which is potentially most interesting, but when you go back to their website, you don't experience some of the hot or great visuals because potentially it's static. And here's another example where, very simple, I've got great content, I'm updating that, I want to be able to display that, so I'm on domain again. Things are changing in real time. We do cookie the user, so when they come back to different pages, we're showing them different types of content. So that's a smart, very effective way of getting them exposed to a lot of the rich content that, frankly, more than 90% or more never even saw. And then bringing them over to an experience which is like a Pinterest, but it gives them an in-depth view of a lot of content. What's cool about this is that this same unit has been engineered to be distributed across a network. So now, on a real-time basis, I can natively amplify or mobilize my content. This is an exciting thing. And if you think about it, everyone on the call, if you have an email opt-in on your website today, and someone registers for just your email, let's make it simple. Forget about purchasing or registering for, let's say, the webinar, which I need to work with McKay on. But you have trending content or something interesting in your industry. If you're not showing that, you have a missed opportunity. Most thank you pages and exit pages on purchases, or even the emails that show up in the inbox, do not have anything that really draws the consumer back in. And this got, we have actually a case study out on our blog about this, but 16% CTR is nothing to laugh about. And it's being very simple and very powerful, presenting content to your customers when they do an action to get them re-engaged. And this is not only effective, but this is on-domain native insertion. So native amplification, great. Got all this great content. How do I get it out? How am I going to push this over, let's say, to an influencer network? There's many companies out there doing this, and in different formats. Some are where you actually buy into the network and then it just gets automatically distributed. I prefer and recommend that you are in context. So you're not just being put into a sea of other content, but your content's in context. So when I said content is created as part of your content, that's really where we're seeing that the highest degree of engagement, the greatest amount of social share, and is really creating an asset that can be repurposed. And here's a cool example of that, where taking great content from a cruise line, which they do create amazing visuals, but if you're not sitting on their website, if you're not sitting on their social channel, And it's easy for anyone on the call to go to a social post on any site, look at how many their followers are, and calculate their percentage reach or percentage engaged, because you can look at the engagement numbers, like how much happened on that piece of post. And usually it's pitiful. So being able to amplify in context, so being a part of, let's say, the Virgin Island series of content, that gets distributed over many different sources, but then the content that's coming from the brand is real time and it's changing. Now you've got something. And that's why these are not only working, but very effective, driving people back to engage with the content and obviously to a call to action for the brand. And again, we have many examples like that across a multitude of different brands. Be more than happy to show you some more details on that. And I'm going to end out with number 5 being mobile, mobile, mobile. If your team is not thinking about mobile, I want you today to go and sit down with whoever's either doing Site Catalyst or Google Analytics and just pull a report, please. And how many people came from social that were mobile that clicked on your content? How many people came to your blog? How many people came to your e-commerce? Whatever. If you already know this and you've already optimized and you've already created a native client, you're way ahead. But most brands, even their own website or properties, don't perform very well. And this is, again, back to the in-stream why this has been so effective as being in-stream content. And I wanted to show it before and after. I mean, this is reality, is that you go to some of these very high-end and unquestionable, there's some big brands out there that are creating some great content, but when you go to a mobile experience, usually it's very static. And the reality is your customers are actually telling you what's cool. Not only are they telling you what's cool, is what they're engaging and sharing is more relevant to their look-alike audience, right? So why are they not using that? Well, with the ability to do that on the right-hand side, where you provide infinite scrolling, because really there's some undeniable characteristics when it comes to mobile that should be employed. And so, being able to employ these and putting the right content in front of the right people is really the core strategy. And so we have some really fun recommendations on that. And this is a live example, some video of it, of adaptive design, of where, not only am I having infinite scrolling, but then being able to make it easy for the content you have mobile optimized and distributed. And it's phenomenal just how the levels of engagement we're seeing and the actual type of social shares. But again, you're making it accessible and you're being in structuring your content in something they're familiar with. So that's the format and structure we always recommend. If you have yet to invest maybe in an actual native app, which is a totally different discussion. And again, back to that Search Engine Journal post that we put out recently about mobile, there's some key implications that you should always consider. So I'm going to leave you with the 3 different slides here. And because again, I want to push this because this is really about amplification as well. But when you put your user first, you cannot lose. And understanding their interactions and patterns around content they're sharing is core to making a mobile experience worthwhile and coming back to. And and you can. One of the things that I recommended, which was looking at your Google Analytics, is look at your drop-offs. It's pretty shocking. And then how many people have actually scrolled 1 or 2, or actually clicked through 1 to 2 deep in your site. And that's another telling fact that you haven't really gotten that optimized well enough. Simplicity. We tried to, on our side, we tried to make, it's like, okay, you've got great assets. How do you package them properly? How are you getting that to be in the moment where a consumer says, hey, I know this type of experience, okay, I can interface with it, and I'm willing to share that content out. And context is king. There's really no if, and, or but about this. If you're not implementing or have some plan of personalizing that content or taking advantage of what's on that mobile device and helping you conform your content into their behavior, you really are missing out on a big opportunity. And so we really push this as being part of your core content strategy is how your content's being displayed and how it's really being mobile optimized to give the best experience possible. And so, anyone on the call, if you want to launch your native content, native strategy, it's free, and you can come in and try it out. And it's just bit.ly launch native, or if you desire and you need to have some personal touch or answer some specific questions like, well, how do you do this, and why is this going to make me money, we'd be more than happy to set some time to go over the details and show you some even greater case studies that would validate our position. So thank you for your time today.
Awesome,
okay.
Chase. Good stuff. Great stuff. Let's get into some questions here. Everybody type your questions in if you have them for Chase. I'll read those to him. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. So while I'm waiting for a couple questions to come in here, Chase, I've got one for you. So talk a little bit about the effectiveness of content marketing in relation to actual lead gen. Do you think that content, how can people use content, or what is the most effective strategy for content as a lead gen tool used in the ways you've described? Or is it primarily about traffic and branding, or where does lead gen fall in the equation for you?
Well, for us, we both did infographics and ebooks. All our ebooks, we have, we give an overview, talk about who was in the ebooks, and then they have to register. And when they register for an ebook, so like if you go and Google top 50 fashion brands, Room 214, usually just it was incredibly Google indexed, was just great. When you have to go and register for that. And when you register, we give you a free analysis of the entire industry of fashion. Same thing we did with medical. And then we talk about, how you can amplify your own content. So we found that from a lead gen perspective, creating great content and then asking for, having an awesome post about it, clearly getting someone to talk about it external, like we've done stuff with Forbes and other media-based outlets that, publish something, or we provided them something, and getting, people to come to your page, but they're not giving away content. I think it's a double-edged sword, what you give away versus what you request someone to register for. And if the reality is, if somebody doesn't want to give you their email and name, and we limit it to we actually limit it to about just the name and email. We try to make it really simple, because most technology out there, you can look up all the other attributions. It's still shocking today to see people asking for 20 things on a form. That's just suicide. So that's something I would recommend. What's anything else?
Yeah, no, that's great. And then let's see what other questions we've got here. Okay, so regarding, you mentioned like Outbrain, I think you mentioned, they have a couple of competitors. Talk about what you guys offer in relation. Yeah, so talk about what you guys offer in relation to that type of a service. Explain briefly, and I know you did this in the presentation, but if you could just hit on it again. What is it that they do specifically, and what is it that you guys do with content, and how are those two things different?
Right. Well, they're in essence, they're an ad network in its purest form. So, if you wanted to do what we call dedicated on-domain and dedicated content, where only your content as a brand is showing up and being distributed, and you're being inserted within, let's say, the content across this, like a blog network, or maybe you're part of an advertorial and it's being dropped into, let's say, Inc. magazine, whatnot. Then in that context, you don't show up on the right-hand side. You're in part of the content. If you're running on your own properties or cross properties, you you're not buying an ad. We're optimizing your content to be redistributed on your own domain. So, most brands, even though they're, we talk about them being a publisher, the reality is that they're a brand. And, to have that type of technology, you're not going to run third-party ads on your site, but you definitely want to take your own content and amplify it across your own domain. And connect that with a visual hub really creates an amazing combination. And that's really, I think, beyond that, and using the social graph data for optimization is a big differentiator we bring to the table.
That's great. So you talked a little bit about social sharing and sort of the decreased, I don't know whether to say effectiveness or impact. Can you talk about that as a trend? What do you see in terms of social in the future regarding everything from sharing and traffic to SEO? I mean, how big of a deal is social sharing in this whole process?
Well, and that's a great question, McKay. Social sharing in general has challenges because everybody's trying to get you to share their content. And at the end of the day, and the analysis we did on Disney was really indicative of that, where, the networks changed their strategy, eliminating or I would say, attenuating your visibility of your content unless you pay for it. So now, this organic reach across these networks has diminished greatly, whereas brands are seeing a huge share ratio when it comes to Instagram. So we're about to do a whole insights and analysis with Room 214 on the fashion industry and showing the Instagram growth. So a lot of times brands are having to change their strategy on their content to be where consumers are sharing, and their content visibility is a challenge as well. And you mentioned the SEO element. Google is in the business of making money. They are allowing us to use SEO techniques, but at the end of the day, they want you to buy ads. I mean, that's why they exist. Yes, they're a great search engine, but the reality is when you do a search today, pretty much everything above the fold is ads, and I don't think you disagree with that. And it's been highly gamed content, to say the least. With the Panda and Penguin release, and there's been a lot of changes which effectively hurt bloggers and whatnot. The good old days of using SEO and the methods really don't fully apply, where again, going back to this incredibly great content, high quality content, getting that on sites that have high page authority is really going to be, for a brand, is the key strategy. I honestly do not know how Google is actually treating advertorial if it's done really well. And it appears that some of this ranks high from an SEO perspective. So the advertorial native insertion strategy of putting content out there that does get indexed and is being distributed in a really structured way has big benefits. How long that will last, because as you know, Google could just push a button, right? And they wipe all this out. You start back to zero. So there is some glory days right now in the space. It does look like it could continue, but I think as a brand manager or a CMO, they have to be reticent to the fact that things will change, and we're in the business of change.
That's great. Great answer. Well, Chase, thanks for taking the time, sir. We appreciate it. It's been a fantastic 50 minutes of content. Really, really great job. I encourage everybody to email Chase if you have questions or call him directly. You can see on your screen there how to do that. And then I would also encourage you to go to logmycalls.com/webinar, logmycalls.com/webinar to see the recording from this webinar. I'll post it later today. And then to see recordings for past webinars and sign up for future webinars. So with that, Chase, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us from all over North America. And we appreciate your time. Hope to see you again on another Log My Calls webinar. Chase, any last thoughts before we conclude?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their time and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. And Chase, thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.